Welcome back to another episode of Reframing the Image of Relationships, where we dive deep into the real issues that shape and sometimes break our relationships. Today, we're tackling a silent but powerful force that, left unchecked, can slowly erode the foundation of even the strongest connections: perfectionism. Perfectionism is that subtle voice in our mind that whispers, if only things were flawless, then everything would be better. It drives us to set unrealistic expectations both for ourselves and for our partners, leaving no room for mistakes, no space for grace. But the truth is, the pursuit of perfectionism often leads to frustration, resentment, and emotional distance, suffocating the very environment that relationships are meant to nurture. Today, we're going to uncover how perfectionism destroys relationships, not just romantic relationships, but also friendships, family ties, and even our connections with God. Together, we'll explore the emotional and spiritual toll it takes, and most importantly, how embracing God's design for grace, progress, and love can restore harmony and perfectionism has stolen. By the end of this conversation, my hope is that you'll have a new understanding of the hidden ways perfectionism is at work in your life and how letting go of those ideals can breathe fresh air into your relationships. So, if you're ever felt the pressure of being flawless or to expect flawlessness from those you love, this episode is absolutely for you. That being said, let's dive in. Now, you guys know how I like to start things off because at the end of the day, this is based on the Empowering Perspective community. And here, everybody is a subject matter expert of their own perspective. So if you're in the chat, by all means, ask questions, share your perspective, things of that nature, because you guys know I would kind of tear up all the show notes just so we can answer your questions. And that way you can get the value that you actually need. So, first, I would like to just kind of ask a very simple question. And although it is simple, it may not necessarily be a simple response. How do you describe perfectionism and how does perfectionism show up in relationships?
I think it's like what you said in the beginning. It's having a mindset of striving for flawlessness or setting extremely high standards and or expectations. Um, I didn't realize until really going through these questions how I have done this to myself time and time again of setting high expectations and then getting frustrated or becoming self-critical of myself. As far as in modern relationships or how does it show up in relationships, I think those unrealistic expectations of our partners or fear of vulnerability and sometimes avoidance of conflict.
Sorry for the silence. Okay, I was trying to unmute myself. um, I agree with what Levon was saying. Also, there's this you have to be flawless. We see that in everywhere, every advertisement. You have to be flawless. You have to perfectionism is something that has been projected to us, and then we project it onto ourselves and to other people. So if you have that mindset of perfectionism, which I did, so I'm learning that I thought I had to do everything right. And once I learned that I'm never going to ever reach um that mindset that I can do everything right, I learned that um what I have to continue to do is striving and make sure that I am continuing to be mindful that I'm not perfect, but I know who is perfect. So those are some of my thoughts. And how does it show up? When it shows up, if you place perfectionism onto someone else, they're going to resent it. Um, they're going to not they don't they're going to distance themselves from you because they're going to say, well, you think you're perfect and you want me to be perfect, because I've heard that comment before. And so there's something we just have to be mindful of.
Well, I definitely agree with both of you ladies, and much of the same, definitely without flaws. I think it shows up, you set these high standards for yourself. Um, and like you mentioned, it's unrealistic, right? Constantly pursuing a thing, right? A status, a place, items, and then or even like the desire to perform at a certain level. That's what I think perfectionism is. And I personally don't operate in that space as often as I thought I did, because I realize that most of the time I'm like, oh, whatever. Like right now, right? This lighting is not right. And normally I would I would be like trying to get the light. No, not even, right? Because this is all a part of going live. This is all a part of, having these moments where you just can't get it all perfect, right? So I realized that the older I've gotten, the less perfect I'm trying to be. And instead, I've found a peace with just saying, I did my best in the moment, and that's that. Um, but I think that it can show up in relationships and it bring on this unnecessary stress, and I mean any relationship, burnout at your job, anxiety, you want to be the perfect parent, the perfect, you know, car salesman, realtor, podcaster, CEO. And although it's good as far as to motivate you to drive and to have more and to accomplish a thing, it can just bring on unnecessary, health challenges. And honestly, when you have all that going on, you don't you'll lack inner peace. Like that's not even worth it.
I love it. I love it. Listen, if you guys are out there and you are listening, make sure that you're sharing, make sure that you're hitting the like button, because this is just the beginning of what I think is going to be an awesome conversation. Now, you guys mentioned some things: criticism, unrealistic expectations, status, things, items, stress. Levine, you mentioned being self critical at times. Where do we get this from? Like, if you guys can like reflect back over your life, like, where does that come from?
Sure, comparison is a thief of joy. That's all I got.
uh, um, I would say a lot of it is upbringing, you know, and during childhood development, you're expected to do certain things. I remember when my son was deciding that he wanted to be a construction engineer, and then he decided at the last minute that he was going to change his field to culinary arts. And I'm thinking, I did all of this, and this is what you're doing, and I expect this from you. And then I realized, well, his life, I don't have to live it. So setting um, those high of standards or expectations for someone is can mess up a relationship. It can make, he drew back from me. He wasn't as open and honest about some of the conversations we were having. And so I had to fix that. But I think that it comes from our family and or sometimes friends put on us as far as expectations are concerned, as well as jobs and other things.
And I agree with what the ladies are saying. I also thought about that it comes from us wanting to be like the masses. I think some of that is the comparison. I want what they have, coveting. I'm just, some of that comes from wanting what someone else has, not understanding where they have gone to get to where they're at, or even if it's realistic, because people only show you what they want you to see. And a lot of times we get how we want to be from other people. And that's not a bad thing, but you have to be mindful of the examples that you are following. And I do agree it comes from upbringing as well. I think it comes from upbringing.
Yeah, I kind of. I'm going to start where LeBron was at. I agree with the upbringing part. Actually, I'm agreeing with everybody saying first, but I definitely have a very strong agreement with the upbringing part because it looks different from person to person. Some of it can be lack. You were raised in lack, you experienced lack, and lack didn't feel good, and you've seen your parents struggle and things of that nature. And then on the other side, when you become an adult, you try to do everything that you can so you don't experience that. And so you put forth every bit of energy that you have because you have this image in your mind of what your life is supposed to turn out to be. And then that gets us to a lot of comparison. So I'm seeing what, the people I went to school with, what they're doing, the people I'm looking at on TV, which is probably the worst thing we should be doing. Looking at what they're doing on TV, saying, I want that, so forth and so on. And so we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And definitely, to Lisa's point, coveting what other people have. You know, you see the nice cars, you see the nice houses, and then reminding yourself of the lack that you grew up in. Now, the nice things become a goal that you set. In fact, a lot of people set, they are unrealistic, but they're erroneously placed goals, because the goals that they have for themselves are the acquisition of things and not the achievements of, fulfillment, the achievement of, helping others and things of that nature. So they be very empty, um, at best. And then at some point in your life, you get to what Queenie just said. The older I get, the less perfect I feel I need to be. And that kind of reminds me of a conversation we were having right before we went live, where you said you remember when I first got started, I was a total mess. And I know you can remember those conversations. I was like, oh my God, I just, and he was like, no, that was good. I was like, no, it wasn't good. It was bad. It was the most terrible thing ever. And it's like you're so self critical because you want to be the best. And there's nothing wrong, if I can just be transparent, there's nothing wrong with wanting to do well. But sometimes you can want to do well so bad that you've put yourself at the center of doing well, as opposed to putting others at the center of it. Like, once I got to that point, to Queenie, to your point, once I got to that point that I realized that every time I hit the live button, it doesn't matter what I look like, it doesn't matter what I'm wearing and all that other great stuff. Even though I do try to do something in conjunction with what we're doing, it's more so about the people that I'm serving. And if I make them the center of attention instead of me the center of attention, then I can talk less and worry less about myself. I literally had this conversation probably about 3 days ago, with a bunch of lieutenants. And I said, when you're standing in front of a group, whether it's public speaking, whether it's in your formation, or whatever the case may be, always keep in mind that they're the reason why you're there. And if you can do that, you'll think less about yourself, then you'll be less nervous about public speaking, things of that nature. So, any thoughts in relation to what I said? Any comments, feedback? Queenie, you can take a jab right now if you want to. I'm okay with it. I'm secure in all of that. No, I was a total mess. I'll say it out loud. I
Now,
was.
I have always been supportive of the vision. I mean, we go back far enough to where we had those conversations back, I say back in the day. So we go back far enough to where we had those conversations. And I agree. I remember, how you were viewing the work you were doing in this space. And, I was just like, "No, no, no, that was great, Dwayne. No, 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 that you got something. You're on to it." And I know you knew it, but I think you had a expectation for yourself. And funny, you were looking at what I was doing. I'm thinking, no, like you got it. I'm just over here doing this little work over here, but it's so true. We have this standard set for ourselves, and sometimes it is because we are looking at others versus looking at the purpose that God has placed in us. So we're looking out there versus, like, I tend to wake up and say, God, just give me my portion, right? I'm okay with the portion that you have for me. And it doesn't always have to look like everyone else's, even if I want it to look like everyone else's. I literally have to release that. And I think that's why I say comparison is a thief of joy. And I love that because when I compare myself, I may not be able to meet that standard that someone else. It's just that's not who I am. I'm not built that way. I don't have the same ingredients that they have, right? So if I'm looking on the surface, then I will always walk around feeling less than if that's what I'm comparing it to. But when I become grateful and thankful with who I am and the portion that God has given me to work with. And I know that I'm doing the best with what I have. Oh, I'm good. There's like, okay. I mean, I may want more, but it's just not my time yet. I'm good.
We should have had this conversation about 4 weeks ago when I was in my feelings. And you could have came with all of that information and I would have been out of my feelings. But thank you for sharing that. It
Bless you,
helps.
sweetheart.
Lisa, you have anything?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I
Um,
agree with what everyone is saying. So, I don't want to, add to it or belabor it, but I just agree with it.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
No, no, you're fine. And again, I was focused on how I performed when it comes down to tasks. And I think that's one of the things that we do all the time, which is part of the reason why we struggle. We look at the task that we're doing, and I'm expecting perfection in the execution of the task. But in all actuality, failure is part of the process. And so once we get to the point of embracing the failure and learning the lessons that we should in the midst of the failed attempts, then we take those lessons, apply those lessons, and then go back and do it again and do it again and then do it again and do it again. And then it just gets to the point that that thing becomes second nature. And like Queen was saying, you'll look at a person and say, man, they're natural at doing this. No, it's not natural. Trust me, it was a lot of frustration, a lot of failed attempts, a lot of sweat because trust me, under all these lights, it is hot. And most people don't realize it. It's a huge fan sitting right over there blowing on me. So it looks good here, but you don't know all this other stuff that's going on back here. So I just want to start that. Now, going back to the relationship thing, because generally what is revealed in me can be projected on somebody else. So if I am self-critical because I am actually a perfectionist and just not owning that, then how does that show up when I connect myself with somebody else? And it's not necessarily just a intimate relationship. It could be a friendship, it could be family members, things of that nature. Do we project perfectionism on partners?
Absolutely. You see it all the time. Um, I had a friend, I have a friend actually, and she wanted me to speak a certain kind of way, or, well, you shouldn't say that. And of course, um, not wanting to argue or antagonize the situation, I chose silence at the moment. And then she came back for it again. And finally, I had to kind of smooth the surface out and say, yeah, that's how you speak. You can't tell me how to speak. Although I appreciate the information, let me work on me and you worry about you. So, yes, we can definitely project perfectionism on friendships. We can do it at work. I used to have this thing, it's no longer there, I have to admit, but I used to have this thing when I train someone to do something and they have questions, I answer them. But if they still don't know how to do it after I give them a walkthrough, have trained them and answered their questions, there's a couple things I can't do. And stupid is one of them. And so I had to get out of the space of calling people stupid because if you got the process, it shouldn't be that hard. But that's my own perception, and I expected something more from them based on what I gave them, and that's not fair. And I didn't realize that at my younger age, but at this big old age, I think I got that one taken care of.
I just want you to know somebody wrote that down. There's a lot of things I can accept, but stupid ain't one of them. Just putting that out there. Go ahead, Queen. I'm sorry.
Levon. Look, I so agree with that. And yes, um, I do believe, I mean, of course, I was sitting here thinking like sometimes we expect mastery from people, for things that we can't master ourselves, right? There's a reason why people are hypocritical, right? Do as I say, not as I do. I mean, I think we all have that, some probably worse than others, some intentional and some not, right? I think that we do come in with these expectations. I did it with my children, and I'll use them as a perfect example. I wanted them to, as Levon say, speak a certain way, carry yourself a certain way. Um, Now, that is part of the training that I thought I was giving my children, right? Because they're going to face more than just mom's house. Um, but it can spill over into our relationship. Uh, I personally just say you don't always have to change people. You just have to change the relationship for yourself. Either you're going to deal with them or you're not. So you have the ability to change that connection with the relationship, right? And I'm not here to judge whether that's healthy or not. It's just your choice. It's better for you to change your connection with them rather than try to change them, right? So I'm still learning that because we are on a platform where we have opinions, right? So we're constantly judging things and people and situations around us. And I try my best to be mindful when it comes to my partner, not to have these, projection battles with him saying he should do this or that if it was me, because I think we do that. If it was me, I, So I constantly have to train myself not to do that or retrain my brain not to do that. So yes, I'm guilty as well.
I was sitting here thinking about the different ways of mindsets that we have growing up and that are being projected onto us. And then we in turn do that to someone else, right? So if you are projecting onto someone that you want them to be perfect or never make a mistake, then that's not, of course that's not, I have so many processes going through my mind. Of course that's not realistic, right? So if we are asking someone to be perfect and we are not perfect and we're never going to be perfect, and then they're going to want to, I think earlier when I said they're not going to want to be around us, right? You're going to make them feel inadequate. They may feel there's some confusion because, I did not meet the requirements. So because of that, I don't want to be around this person. And we can cause people to feel that way because we have this standard that we're trying to project onto them. And so I think in that aspect, when we're in relationships, that can be a problem. It does not bring us closer. It actually makes us brings us further apart. So that's one of the thoughts that I have.
It doesn't work if you don't come
You,
off mute.
You know
you,
what? Y'all could at least give a brother a heads up. No, I'm joking. So no, I think that's a great point. And that was a perfect segue into what I want to uncover moving forward, because the projective nature of perfectionism will put you to the point of feeling a particular type of way when a person does or does not do a thing. So that being said, should we have expectations of our partners? If so, what usually happens when my partner does not live up to my expectations, and why?
Please.
I am not one for expectations. Expectations leads to disappointment. Um, yeah, so having expectation, I don't want anyone to have expectations of me. Um, although I will have to say, although if I respect you, I expect you to respect me in return. That's just it seems like a given. Although we often fall still into that space of disappointment because you might not get um, the respect in the way that you think that you should receive it. But who are you to tell someone how they're supposed to respect you, right? You, the picture might not look the same. If so, what usually happens when my partner doesn't live up to my expectations and why? Well, there's usually some type of disagreement, and it's a heated one at that. And why? Because I'm disappointed, I'm upset, I'm frustrated. So you didn't do this, and you didn't do it the way that I wanted you to do it. So now I'm angry, and I have nothing to say, or I have a whole lot to say. And it's not always pleasant, nor is it forgiving. So that's that.
I love your honesty. Um, Wayne, was it one of our questions? I feel so unprepared for this one.
I told you it was going to go a little left today.
I'm calling you out on this one. Okay, okay, okay. So should we have expectations of our partners? I think that's a hard question to answer because whenever you're in relationship, who that person is you are in relationship becomes a part of your world and your life. And if you've worked very hard to create a life that you want to live and you invite someone into it and they're reckless in your life, their behaviors are reckless. So whatever just shows up reckless, that directly impacts you. So when we say, should I have an expectation of my partner? I think there's a standard of living that we have. And I do believe that whether we want to admit it or not, we do have an expectation where whether we should or should not. Um, you cannot come into my life and mishandle me, and I be okay and accepting of that. I may not choose to change you, but I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I'm not trying to change the behavior. I'm not asking for the behavior to change. I am. Because if I want to be with you, but I don't want that behavior, I'm going to speak up about that. Now, what happens when my partner doesn't live up to it? As we've already heard, I'm fully disappointed. Oftentimes, I'm even grieving because I know that this is not going to work for me. Or what happens is I began to conform and try to manipulate myself into being able to accept what I already know is not going to work for me. So, should we? For me with this question, doesn't matter if we should or not. I know that I do. Now, what I do with that expectation and what I do with what those feelings kind of bring for me, that's on me, how I handle it. But yeah, I love you. I want to be with you, but you can't just become reckless in my life and I be okay with that. So that's my answer.
She says conform. I say rebel.
It works too, sis.
I'm gonna have to separate y'all two.
You're waiting on me. Okay. Um, should we have expectations of our partners? We've had this conversation, right? And we shouldn't have expectations of our partner. Um, and what happens when we do have expectations of our partners, we are disappointed because when we're projecting onto somebody how we want them to behave, and they don't behave in the way that we want them to, we are disappointed. So I believe that when we come together and although we are one, we know who we belong to, right? We're coming together, we're working together, and we are becoming one. So we already know what his expectation is of us. And so the expectation that I have to place on myself is what does God expect of me? So that I can be in a healthy environment and and realize that this person is subject to the same thing that I am, error and mistakes. And then I have to identify how do I address those in the space that we're in. So expectations are so difficult. I'm learning. It's something that we have always been told that we should have expectations of someone to do this or do that. But I'm learning that we can't, because if we do, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
I love all these responses, by the way. It's hard to take the suit off. Let's be real. It is very hard to take this suit off. Like, I've lived in this suit my entire life. And Queen, I'm with you. Like, you ain't gonna come up in my life and be reckless with it. But here's how I view it, and it's going to sound very similar to what Lisa said. It does not exclude anything you guys said. It's just from a different lens, right? Um, I have a responsibility to my most important relationship. The expectation that I have in that relationship is on me. I have an expectation on myself to behave a particular type of way. I do not get in relationship with people who do not have that same relationship for themselves. So they should have an expectation on themselves. When we come into relationship, now what that looks like is I become an accountability partner to your expectation for your behavior. So when you start behaving a particular type of way that does not align with what you said you believe, now I just tell you, I share with you my observation, and then I leave it to you to make the adjustment. If you fail to make the adjustment, I remind you of the conversation that we had. But I'm not going to have that conversation too many times, because at the end of the day, those who work on themselves to grow themselves and elevate themselves according to his word and his will also remove themselves from an environment that is unhealthy. And I think health is defined for me based upon his will for my life. So when we have that same viewpoint, when we have that same lens on how we move in space, then we become accountability partners for each other. I think that perspective takes a lot of stress off of people because it's no longer me trying to conform your behavior to what I see. It's me reminding you of it's me reminding you of what you said you wanted to do for yourself, and me just being objective based upon what I observed in your behavior. Does that work? Is that feasible? Can your thoughts?
I actually agree with you, Dwayne.
What?
I
Hold on.
know.
Where's my diary? No, I'm joking.
That was so good. That was really, although you were talking about the reminder, I was sitting here like, now is this reminder gentle or yeah, but that's me, right? But
Mhm.
I totally agree. Like we have to be a mirror to one another. This isn't one-sided,
Right.
right? We are in an agreement. That's the reason why we got into this situation. So we agreed, right? And if we didn't agree, we need to have that conversation. I know Lisa has always been big on making sure we have these conversations.
Hmm.
So assuming we've had it, then if I'm failing to do my part, hold me accountable. I'm okay with it. I'm open to that. But I
Right.
love that we are a mirror. So thank you, Dwayne. That was good.
I agree with what you said. I just want you to understand, though, in this life that I've seen, baby, that's not what you get when you get with people. You get that representative, you hang out with that representative for 8 months, and then all of a sudden somebody else show up. You know what I'm saying? So those conversations go out the window because it's been a lie all the time.
Right.
Um, so I commend you, but I can't say that for every other male species that I have come across. I'm not saying all, but I
Right.
am saying most.
Not saying all.
But I am saying most. Okay. I'm saying that I come across. I'm not saying,
No, no, you
the
good.
whole entire world. Now.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with being honest.
Yeah.
And I think to that point, if I can, before Lisa, if you regard me for just 1 second, um, I think to that point that helps us to define the spaces that we are in, right? If that's who you are, I'm okay with that. That's who you choose to be. I don't necessarily have to be connected with you like that. That's my choice for my life, just like it's your choice for your life. I don't make you feel like you're like pond scum just because you don't believe like I believe. And I think that's one of the issues, and I think everybody knows that when you pay close attention. I think that's one of the issues that we are in. One of the errors that we're in to where everybody has an opinion, everybody feel like they must agree. Listen, I don't really care if you agree with me or not. That's part of the problem. You feel that everything I say you must agree to, and if you don't, you must voice the fact that you don't agree. I didn't say if you agree, I said it for you to consider. Of course, I'm not talking to y'all, I'm just talking about in space, right? So when we come across these people and they share, well, this is what what I'm doing with my life, and this is what I believe, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. That's awesome. This is what I believe. This is my purpose. This is the things that I'm doing, so forth and so on. Well, that's too much. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you saying that. But at the end of the day, this is what I'm doing. It's not going to change because you think it's too much. And I think that's part of the issue. Everybody feels that, well, you need to do this and you need to do that. Listen, I am not qualified to tell a woman what she is to do. There's only one thing I can go to, and that thing helps me to understand what this particular type of woman looks like. And that woman that looks like that ideally believes the same way I believe. And I always say she's found in Proverbs 31. So every man, if you're looking for a woman that fits that mold, that's specific instructions that you can take for yourself and then become observers of that. Not necessarily looking for perfection, but again, just looking to see if that's her belief system. So I'm glad you said that because you're right. That is true. That's exactly what you see in today's world. I'm sorry, Lisa, I got a little long winded. Go ahead.
No, no, it's okay. I think that this is part of our responsibility as well, is to um, have that discernment. that's part of our responsibility. So we can't go off of what the person is just saying. There are a lot of things that we have to be mindful of, not just what you're saying, what you're doing, how you moving. Are you lining up with what is everything lining up with what you say? We have, this is why you have to take your time before you enter into anything. Because if we're stopping and like, well, and looking at just the exterior and then the smooth talking, then you're gonna make a decision from the wrong place. Because if you don't try to connect with who this individual is, and that takes time for you to try to understand it. And then guess what? Even after you have a measure of understanding, the person's going to continue to change, you're going to continue to grow. And that's the goal. Hopefully, when you come together, that you're growing together. And so we have to be mindful to take our time and to observe not just the exterior, but also who this person is. You see them show up and be. You have to be able to be mindful of that. And so that's all I wanted to add.
No, that's good because I agree. I think it's important that if again, if we had that conversation, like Queenie said, if we had that conversation in the beginning, that becomes the foundation of what we build our relationship on. And then moving forward, Abe said, manage your expectations. Sure, absolutely. But again, my expectations are for me. So that's what I'm managing. Again, I'm an accountability partner for you, right? And I'm helping you. I'm reminding you of what you said you was going to do, and vice versa. You're doing the same thing for me as well. Because when I step out of line and do something I don't have any business doing that does not line up with the behavior that reveals what I truly believe, now you're saying, hey, look, I know this is what we talked about in the beginning, but you're not necessarily doing that. And then if I am mature in the way that I am existing right now, then I ask you to articulate with clarity what you observe in my behavior, hopefully, right? But again, like Levon said, that's not where most people at. They get offended, they get, upset, whatever the case may be. I don't do that. I don't do that. I don't do that. Well, hold on. If that person sees it, and at the end of the day, if we understand that everybody has blind spots, then there's a high probability of what that person says is actually reality. And the other side to Lisa, you mentioned growing. It is for me, it's intentional. It's important. Those who grow together stay together, but those who don't grow together, they end up growing apart. So it's important that everybody in that relationship, and again, it's not just intimate relationships, it's friendships, so forth and so on. If we become intentional about improving ourselves, then at the end of the day, we will have a better relationship overall. But if one person is improving themselves and the other person is not, like I said, those who improve themselves can remove themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that, because at the end of the day, I don't want you living a life of anxiety because now I'm at a different space in my life, or vice versa, and you're finding it very difficult to just connect with me on any level. And we talked about this on Coach's Corner as well. When one person is improving and the other person is not improving, then the other person is going to have an expectation of what you filled your cup up with to pour in their cup now. So now it becomes kind of like very dangerous at best. So thank you all for your wonderful words of wisdom. I greatly appreciate that. Um, Moving forward, because again, perfectionism, in my opinion, can be a barrier to true connection. Perfectionism affects your ability to fully accept your partner or spouse for who they are, flaws and all. What are your thoughts on that assertion?
Okay, I'll go first. um, I think there is some difficulty um in forgiving, right? There's some difficulty um because because if you're perfectionist, right, you have these expectations that you have put onto someone, and if they don't live up to your expectations, then there is this barrier that is created. And so because that barrier is there, um so you made me lose my thought. Because a barrier is there, you can make the person feel like it's more difficult. It's more difficult for you to be in relationship because that barrier is there. So there's they may be struggling, leading to grudges that are staying there with you because you guys are not coming together, rather than embracing that we're all human, right? And so we can't embrace that fact. So now we have this barrier that we have placed ourselves on our partner because we're forgetting that we're all human. We're all going to err and make mistakes, or bad decisions. I'll say, as Coach says, we'll make bad decisions. There's that distance that we will create between each other as well, if that makes sense. Okay.
I love that. And I agree with it. When I look at this question, um, I had to first like look at myself, like, what have have I ever experienced this? And I used to say in like getting to know someone that it showed up, like, oh, that thing showed up. And now I can't get over it, right? I can't unsee the seeing at this point, right? Whatever that thing is, I like them until, right? So what I realized, and it wasn't because of, for me personally, it wasn't because of perfectionism, it was just preference, right? Like, what, I don't think I like that. Um, but if I think about perfectionism and how that it shows up, and I believe that when that happens, we'll oftentimes focus on what's wrong, air quotes, with the person rather than what's right with them, right? We'll begin to not really see the person as who they are, all the things that they, because we're made up of all these the things you focus on becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so now that person is just that thing, that imperfect individual. Um, and we can't really see the greatness of what that person can actually bring to the relationship. We don't even know how to even articulate that because the ick is sitting there, right? That lack of perfection is sitting there. Um, but one thing I learned in it is that when we can fully accept people for who they are, it's like the magic happens. But whenever you're facing this barrier where you just can't see past that thing that really is within you, right? Because you're projecting that. I think we miss out oftentimes, and sometimes I believe if we look back, we probably missed out on some really good people. And again, I'm not talking about just relationship, like intimate relationships, but we probably missed out on some really good people because we had not matured in this area, right? And so, unfortunately, you can't always get that time back. So there you have it.
Well, I just perfectionism affects your ability to fully accept your partner or spouse for who they are. Totally agree. Totally agree. I think it brings on a judgment call. I think we set unrealistic expectations again. I think there's criticism. No, I know that there's criticism there, and also the ability to compare, which then you tear up the foundation of ever having any trust or acceptance for the person. So, absolutely, it can. Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Lisa, I like when you made mention of the human experience. Um, and it matters. The human experience matters. But I think a lot of times, and this is not against what you're saying, this is actually in support of what you're saying. I think a lot of times we focus too much on the human experience, and we feel that we are humans trying to have a spiritual experience, when in essence we're spirits who are living a human experience. Therefore, will you make a mistake? Sure. Will I make a mistake? Absolutely, guaranteed. If you stick around long enough, I promise you I'm going to mess something up. Just give time. But at that point, when the mistake is made, can you accept it as a mistake, or I'm sorry, as a bad decision, flaw in the error, a flaw in judgment, whatever that be? And can we recover from that thing? We tend to go in particular spaces, specifically intimate relationships, and we have like a no fail criteria. If this were to happen, all bets are off. And my advice at that point is that you need to stay single just a little while longer. Because at the end of the day, you have to realize that people are people. They're going to make bad decisions. They're going to err in judgment. And if you do not believe that the person that you're with, the people that you surround yourself with, are going to do that, then pay close attention to yourself. I think a lot of time the concept of perfectionism, I'm talking me now internally, internal concept of perfection makes it very difficult for you to connect with me because I have this, this like very um, adamant nature about being the best at everything. I want to be this. I want to do the best at that. I want to do the best at this. I want to be the best at that. And then in your mind, you may look at it like, man, like, how do I measure up? How do I measure up to that? To at the end of the day, it's Saturday. I want to chill out. I want to relax. I want to lay in the bed until 11 o'clock. This joker here gets up at 4:30 in the morning on a Saturday. Like for what? So it's like stuff like that. That's facts. Stuff like that. People start comparing themselves. Going back to Queen's point, they start comparing themselves to their partner, and some of those things aren't necessarily realized until afterwards. On the other side, the perfectionism that I may have in you, or whatever the case, the perfectionism that I'm projecting on you, what ends up happening is that now whenever you make an error in judgment, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so you kind of give the impression of a drill sergeant in relationships. But be mindful that everybody, ideally, because we're talking to adults, everybody is an adult. So you have a choice to do whatever it is you want to do or need to do for yourself. And that's why I keep making the assertion that, hey, whenever you've taken the time to improve yourself, elevate your level of consciousness and things of that nature, you do not subject yourself to a person who has not and will not and elect not to do that for themselves as well. Because now what you're going to end up doing, and I don't mean this in a negative fashion when I say it, you're going to have to lower your level of consciousness, lower your level of awareness just to appease the space that they're in. And that can become problematic. And that in turn will create a divide in the relationship. And you never really get an opportunity to experience the authentic nature of the other person. So if I think that's what you guys are saying, if I'm kind of like in the ballpark, help me understand that.
I guess I just wanted to add to this that if we don't understand anything else from this conversation, is that perfectionism is a fallacy. So none of us are going to ever be perfect because we were not created to be perfect. There's only one person who is perfect. And when we place that perceived mindset of perfection that we have created for ourselves based on other unhealthy environments or examples that we saw, then what we're doing and we're trying to project that onto someone else, we're not going to ever be able to fully experience that person because now we have this barrier that they're never ever going to meet your expectations. Never. You're never going to be able to find someone who is going to meet your expectations, which is sad because what are expectations? They're false perceptions. If we're trying to have someone to meet that perfection that we created or was example for us, that's unrealistic. And that's what I just wanted to add to what you were saying.
I just want to throw this out there. My grandfather told me a long time, when people show you or tell you who they are, believe them the first time. That's all.
That doggone Levon boy, she cut like a knife, don't she?
Rough, rugged, and raw. I love it.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's important to understand, right? Um, Again, recognize that you yourself need a level of grace, and by that same token, and I'm not saying that it's mine to give, but understanding that I need it every day, and I don't care who you are, you need it. If I need it every day, then so does the person that you're in a relationship with, which in turn takes us to the point of how grace and forgiveness counteracts perfectionism. Now, I get it. It may sound a little difficult, when we think about it. But in what ways do you think practicing forgiveness can shift the atmosphere in relationships from one of criticism to one of compassion?
I have a couple words to say. It was in Matthew, I want to say chapter what, 17 or 18 when we were doing Bible study. And it says, when you forgive, what was it? 70 times 7. That's a lot of forgiveness. That's 490 times. I don't know if I have it in me. However, um, practicing forgiveness, though, truthfully, it it frees you. You know, it's not something that you have to hold on to. I remember um, holding on to grudges and not forgiving the person, and I was hurting me. I wasn't hurting them. They didn't care. They kept doing what they do, how they do, when they do it. And I'm the one sitting over here in the corner with a grudge and upset, not talking to them, chest all full. And it can cause health issues tremendously. So, in what ways do you think practicing forgiveness can shift the atmosphere in relationships from one of criticism to one of compassion? Remember that each person, including yourself, has already done something that they are not proud of at one point in time in life. So if you found forgiveness within yourself, you can definitely find forgiveness within someone else, or within yourself to forgive someone else.
I love that. When I look at this, I think about acceptance more than anything. So I think that forgiveness allows you to accept that no one's perfect, right? Um, and depending on if you know what you're going to do with that relationship, I think forgiveness allows space for you to repair, the things that were damaged and broken. And I believe that the only way you can even do that is by approaching it with compassion and understanding. Um, and I believe in, I think we have to work on the being critical. Like, I think we really have to be very intentional and conscious about how critical we can be as people in relationships. I love earlier when Lisa mentioned how, um, like, judging or just having this level of expectation of perfectionism towards a partner, how it can make them feel inadequate. Like she spoke straight to me when she said that. And when she said it, I wrote a message over here to formally apologize for anyone I've ever projected my beliefs and expectations on and made them feel that way. So I believe that that's what happens, right? Whenever we're in relationship and we begin to practice the art of forgiveness. Because when people wrong you, I personally also think that it's a valid feeling to be resentful, angry, frustrated. Like all that makes sense to me. But how long are you going to hold on to it? How long are you going to live in that, right? Because all it does is it's just damaging to the body. It's damaging to the soul. It's damaging to the spirit. And it's definitely damaging to the relationship. But when you practice the art of forgiveness, either you are freeing yourself or in some cases you're freeing yourself from the thing, from the person, right? Or maybe even freeing them to let them go, right? I forgive you. I'm just going to go ahead and separate this relationship, like you said before, Dwayne. And so I love that you asked this question because I do know in my own relationship, when I'm able to forgive and accept, then there is an atmosphere that breeds healthy and thriving. And so I just believe that we have to practice this. Personally, I'll practice it until the day I'm gone because I know I will not master this. I will always remain in practice of it.
But you finished, Queenie? I didn't know if you finished or your mic went out. Okay. Okay. Um, yes, I'm really enjoying this conversation because these are some of the things that, conversations that I've had in this past month. Um, and practicing forgiveness and how can it shift the atmosphere. Okay. It always takes me back to this. I think it's Matthew 5:23-24. I can't give God anything if I know that I have unforgiveness in my heart and I have an issue with someone. I can't present him anything, and that will hinder me from being in close relationship because I'm being disobedient at that time. Okay, so forgiveness is so important. It is not something that you need to sit there and think about. It's something that you need to do and do it quickly, because it when we do it that way, it does not allow us to sit in and dwell on stuff that the enemy would try to place in our mind. Like, well, you should, I wouldn't forgive if I was you. I mean, all of us have heard have heard that. I wouldn't be forgiven if I was you. But that's not his directions to us. So we have to make sure that we are making sure that we do our part. And I know it the if we have an odd against someone, why is it fair that we are the one who was offended is the one who this charge is made to? It's your responsibility to go and get it right, even though you may not have been the one that offended. It's your responsibility. And so when we come together and we continue to practice forgiveness, because it's not about us, it's not about me, but it's about us. And then how can you, if you're in a relationship with someone who you are one with, right? And you have unforgiveness, that unforgiveness is affecting you as well if you're one. And so that's the tension that will be caused in your relationship. So don't sit in unforgiveness.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Um, I think when we look at forgiveness itself, and I just want to put this up there because I agree with what Nadella is saying here. Um, I think when we look at just the word forgiveness, it is something that I have stored up. Lavana, like you said, I don't have it in me. You got it in me. You got it in you. You just don't have it on you. So if I keep it on the exterior, this thing right here don't want me to forgive. That which is in me is willing to forgive and is quick to forgive. But this thing right here, it remembers everything. It remembers what you did. It remembers how you said what you said. It remember the face that you had when you were saying what you were saying. It remember the clothes you were wearing when the face you had, while you were saying what you were. It remembers all that. And at the end of the day, when we separate from that conversation, I am replanted in my head. I am literally priming up. And by the time I come back to that conversation, it sounds a whole bunch heated. But you're absolutely right. I am supposed to forgive and do it as quickly as I possibly can. Now, Queenie, you said something, and I agree with you. Emotions are valid, and I want to make sure that everybody understand that your emotions are valid, but they're not to be projected. It's for me to analyze. My emotions tell me a story about my environment. Therefore, it is important for me to analyze how I'm feeling so that I can understand the information that I'm giving in the environment so I can know what to do next. Not just project the raw emotions when and I know you're not, that's not what you were saying. I just want to make sure that everybody understand that. When you project the raw emotions, now you're giving somebody something that they don't know what to do with. Like, I feel the way that I feel. And then now I'm going to tell you why I feel that way. But did I analyze the emotion to see that whether or not how I feel lines up with what I believe? Or is it kind of like reminding me of some of the things I've been through in the past? So that is an important thing for us to consider. Forgiveness is one of the most important things that we can do in the space of any relationship. However, I do have a question. Is there a point where forgiveness can be taken for granted? And if it is, what do I do with that?
I got this one. I'm just saying, yes, forgiveness can be taken for granted, right? It can be, people can think that it's something that's owed them because of the relationship that they have with you. Now, if you see that and you identify the behavior, and you, I think I've heard you say, Coach, you identify a pattern of behavior and then you address it, right? So if you see the behavior, then you have a decision to make. Do you want to continue to put yourself in this cycle of abuse, because that's what it is? Or do you want to make some space to allow that individual to work on what they need to work on, so that you won't be you won't get some of that projectile from it? So we have to be mindful of that. So
Hmm.
that's my response.
I told you that she shed saves many lives. So I'm just I'm just keeping it a buck. Okay. Um I the very thing that stuck out for me, what Lisa said, remove yourself. And I have gotten the habit of hearing things that I don't necessarily agree with. And instead of having any hard feelings at all, as far as forgiveness is concerned, I forgive and I move out the way. Um, Not to revisit the situation, but I move out the way. And I allow for myself to become one with the spirit and work my way through, well, what did it make me feel like? And why did it make me feel that way? And I can't answer for anyone else. So I come back and I check myself. I reflect on me. Um, but yeah, the taking forgiveness for granted, absolutely. People do it all the time. But again, like Nodella said, it does help others, but it's mostly for you to free yourself from the shackles that you put on yourself with not forgiving.
Hmm.
Yes, and yes, and yes. People do take forgiveness for granted. And again, you, Dwayne, you know me. We don't all have the same tools. We don't all have the same tools to react and respond the same way. And this group, we've matured and we're good, but not everybody has the ability to analyze pre or post or during, right?
Hmm.
So we're dealing with a lot of different spirits out here, right? And so those responses are always going to be different. And yes, when people, and I go back to what Lavon said, because I've never calculated how many times I'm supposed to forgive 70 times. Never done that. I already knew it wasn't going to happen. So I've just not even done that. But for those that may not know, I'm the prodigal daughter over here. So and I'm okay with that because guess what? God's still working on me. But listen, Lavon, I won't make that cut either because I'm going to forgive you this once or twice, maybe three, whatever the time is. And after that, I'm doing exactly what Dwayne and Lisa has been saying. I'm separating myself because people will take you for granted. They will fumble you. They will create, I mean, havoc in your life if you let them because we are human, right? Those people, we all may have a different belief, but this is how I see it. We are human and people will mishandle you. And maybe that's just what they're dealing with. That's just their life. That's just what they have to offer. But we have a big decision to make for us. And Lisa said it like you got to look at not just the outside of a person, but you got to really get an opportunity to get to know them. And I'm with you, Levon. 8, 9, 10 months, honey, they still wearing a mask. And then it falls off. And by that time, your heart is invested. Now you ticked off because you've invested what was real to you and it was never real for them. So will they do it? Will they take advantage? Absolutely. They will misuse you if you allow it. And what I'm learning in my old age is to stop allowing it. My father told me something, and I'm going to end on this. He says, yes, you can forgive your mom. He said, but you don't have to continue to be a rug that she walks on. And when I tell you, when he told me such a great permission to walk away from that unhealthy relationship with my mother. Never felt more felt
You're breaking up a lot, sis. You're
Yeah.
breaking
Yeah, I think she's finished now.
up.
Yeah, the last part came in broken, but I think we got what you were saying. And again, you're right. Absolutely right. I think I think in response to that, and I wanted to ask that intentionally because a lot of times what ends up happening is that we will pursue the things of goodness and righteousness, and want to present the best version of ourselves in relation to that. But sometimes the people that we're in relationship with, they're not necessarily focused on that. They're focused on living their best life, things of that nature. That might be a fault of mine. I made this selection, right? May not have had the conversation like Lisa talked about previously, and all those other great things. But that is something that can be revealed to me in time. If I have to forgive you for the exact same thing over and over and over and over again, at some point I have to recognize that you don't respect me as a person. And once I recognize that you don't respect me as a person, you don't respect my space, then I have a decision that I need to make. And that decision is to create space between me and that person. So I thank you and I greatly appreciate all your responses. And I love the responses that are coming in the chats as well, because Michelle Ray talks about boundaries. Nadella says forgiveness is without condition, just like love. But man created those conditions, not the Father. We are to pattern our lives after the example of Christ. I definitely agree with that one. And I like Crystal's transparency. I lost, there it is. She said she used to struggle with holding grudges and finding forgiveness, but now that I've overcome it, I feel so much better. Congratulations, Crystal, because I think that's an important thing. I think we're all striving to be that person that can forgive immediately, not necessarily hold grudges, because again, that becomes freeing and liberating of us. Okay, as we're pressing forward, we got one last section here: restoring relationships to God intended design, from perfectionism to progress. And it kind of goes back to what Lisa mentioned previously, that perfectionism is a fallacy. It is a goal that is unattainable, because by the time you become like the only one that was ever perfect, it's time for you to go home. So, do you believe focusing on progress rather than perfection has the potential to change the way we view our partners and relationship as a whole? And please don't just give me a one word answer of yes. Thank you.
I think that when you notice progress, or I can say speak for me, when I notice that someone is doing something and is intentionally working on being better for themselves, that creates a better environment for the relationship, then absolutely progress is more important than perfection. Perfection leads to the expectations, where progress is something that can be seen. It's a deed, it can be achieved, it's actionable. Um, and based on focusing on that progress, then you have very little criticism and judgment for the person. And then, in fact, you can maybe able to show some type of unconditional love versus setting those conditions on the love that you have for them.
I did have just one word. Yes, yes, yes. I believe that focusing on the progress is far greater than focusing on perfectionism. Um, yeah, I don't have a lot more to say about that. I just think that what's the purpose of the relationship? Like really making the big thing the big thing. So, yes, yes.
I'm going to say yes, of course. um, so if we focus on growth and efforts instead of mistakes and flaws, then I think that creates a more cohesive environment for us to thrive in and to grow um, in a more positive relationship overall. So that's what I will add.
Okay, so that's where I was going to go next. Like, so how do I focus on progress over perfectionism? Like, what does that look like in the space of personal interaction?
So I think it's you in conversations. I think it's everything that we do in every aspect of our relationship. In conversations, we're listening to understand what the person is saying to us and not being judgmental, but listening, because we have to understand what this person, the thought process they may be having. So we have to be able to have those open, honest conversations with each other and listen. I think that's an aspect of it. One aspect of it.
I agree with that. I also think that um, having a common goal in mind, right? Like, what is the goal? What is? I think that sometimes we may aimlessly be in connection with people We don't know the reason why. We just connected, you know. And sometimes those relationships can be very draining, but I believe that when you are wanting more, I think, out of your own self and your own growth and development, and you're hoping and praying to fulfill your own purpose, you start looking at relationships different and connections differently. So understanding our purpose, or at least trying to figure that out, and you keep that kind of the focus, that's, to me, is way better than looking at the flaws and all, you know. So yeah.
Can you repeat your question, please?
How? How do I focus on progress rather than perfection in the space of personal interaction?
I can give you an example, more so than, and this may answer the question. I noticed, even in my space, that at one point it was toxic, and I started doing things to focus on me, changing myself, and doing the reflection and the work that I needed to do to stop taking things so personal. Because ultimately, I found out that, oh, this is someone projecting their stuff on me, and it's not necessarily me. So once I started doing that, and I would hear statements made or things that would be offensive, I didn't necessarily focus on those things. I focused on the thing that the person was trying to say instead of the nonsense. Um, and then once I started doing that, and I believe that they recognize that you can't argue with yourself, then that switched, or transformed the energy that was in the space, where they started progressing and being more peaceful and learning how to communicate, and those things that made a big difference in the environment and allowed for peacefulness. So in seeing my own actions and focusing on my own progress, I think that that progress led to the other person being able to do the same. And I hope that answered your question.
It did. It did. I like to look at it because I greatly appreciate everything you says. And Darren, I will make sure that you get the get what you're looking for. There's a self-reflective guide to go along with this conversation. Um, I love the way you everybody answered it. I like to look at relationship as a journey and not necessarily a destination. And I think too many times we have more so of a destination concept of relationship as opposed to a journey concept. Who you met today, who I met today, won't be the same person next year. And so, ideally, if we're doing this relationship thing accurately, like we talked about previously, we both are on a journey, a personal journey to grow within our understanding of relationship. What I understood about relationship in my 30s looked different in my 40s, and it surely looked different in my 50s. So now, not only is life a journey as I become more aware of who the creator made me created me to be, but I'm also becoming more aware of what fruitful relationship looks like through his lens. So now when I look at relationship from that aspect, it is more of a progressive thing in nature, not something that I have expected you to perfect it the day that we got into relationship. So if we have that mindset, I am growing, you are growing, we are growing, right? And we're doing this together. And if you're married, you're doing this as one, right? So when we do that, now it's like we don't do the same things we did last year. We don't make the same mistakes we made 3 years ago. We are better at those things. We have more patience with one another. We're more caring towards one another. Now, mind you, that's if you respect the space of relationship, because this is an environment. This is an environment that we created for us to exist, not just exist, but also thrive. And I think, like I've said, I think I said this last night, good is the enemy of great. So a lot of time we achieve good. We're like, okay, we're good. We're just gonna continue to do the same thing that we have been doing. No, You're supposed to progress in the things that you have been doing. So now great becomes available to you and your partner, not just independently, but together. And I think that's one of the most profound ways, at least in my opinion, how we can focus on the progress as opposed to the perfection aspect of it. I don't expect you to have perfected it, but by that same token, you should not be doing the same thing you did last year, and vice versa with me. And if you witness the exact same behavior in 2024, whatever year this is, 2024, that you've seen in 2020, you have a responsibility to tell me about it. That's what relationship gives to you. Like, you shouldn't be in a relationship with a person to where they can't be honest and open with you. That goes back to the whole conversation piece that Lisa mentioned. And not just that, you have to be authentic in your conversation, which means that you, like Queenie said, you got to take the mask off. And taking the mask off is intentional on your behalf, not just me requesting you to take it off. It has to be something that you are putting forth the effort to do. So I greatly appreciate you. I mean, every one of your responses. I love it. I love it. In a respect for everybody's time, because we got maybe about 7.5 minutes left. I want to start with our final thoughts. I want to start with Levine, then we're gonna go Lisa, and then we're gonna hear from Miss Queenie Love over there as she as everybody give their final thoughts. So with that being said, Miss Levine, you have the floor.
This has definitely been a conversation that I needed for myself. And so, one of the things that I would say is the takeaway for me is that a shift in your perspective, your mindset as far as perfectionism and what your expectations are from others can lead to a healthier perception of partnerships and relationships. So be mindful of forgiving 70 times 7 because I know that I am working on that within myself. Although coach says that it's really the without, it's a little bit of both. So be honest with yourself and continue to show love to yourself and others because you are the most important person in your world. If you don't tell yourself you love yourself, no one else will. And I do mean that from the Most High being within, not ever leaving Him separate or with it without.
You're muted, Lisa.
I have really enjoyed this conversation because it helps you to see, for me, I am a believer, and I try to make sure that I adhere or my life is guided by the instructions that are given to me, and so it just helps me to see that there is so much error in perfectionism. Right, there's so much error in it that, and we cannot project that on each other because it actually hinders our relationship. And if we want to grow and have a healthy relationship and be there for each other and grow together and walk together, then we have to make sure that we are being mindful of the instructions that were given to us, and to let this mind, not the examples or the people that you follow, not following them, but following the instructions that were given by the Creator for His creation. And so being perfected or thinking that you are going to be perfect is never the goal. But the goal is coming together, growing together, and continuing to grow together and and continue to become one in relationship.
You're muted, Queenie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Definitely causes me to be more reflective on myself. And so, my final thought with that is I want to make sure that we all remember that perfection isn't our purpose, as we talked about earlier. Growth is right. Perfectionism can feel like a drive for excellence, and oftentimes just heavy weight, and it holds us back from truly embracing our unique strengths. And so, instead, let's celebrate our progress, our efforts, our imperfections, every small step forward, every moment we learn something new. It just adds to the totality of who we are. So, my final word with that is let's be patient and kind with ourselves and even with others, embracing the journey of becoming not perfect, but whole. Here's to releasing the pressure, to finding joy in the process, and to knowing that we are enough just as we are. Thank you.
I greatly appreciate everybody's point of view, their perspective, their wisdom. I think it was spot on for this conversation. Um, I think, like we talked about previously, we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves as it pertains to our day-to-day lives, whether it's at work, whether it's just in the space of just personal interaction, working relationships, family relationships, whatever. We want the best. I get it. There's nothing wrong with wanting the best for yourself. It becomes problematic when you become critical. Self-criticism is where it generally starts at. And then, of course, we being beings that appreciate and desire to be relational, in our connectedness with other people, we tend to become critical of what they do and how they do what they do as well. So we have to be mindful of how we behave. We have to be consciously aware of our thoughts, and our behaviors. Do they reflect what your core belief system is? That's important for us to understand. Therefore, now in the space of just existing, by yourself, you can't have a mindset of perfectionism. Give yourself, be patient with yourself, recognizing that failure is part of the journey, and learning through failure is how you get to the point of success. And if that holds to be true for me in my own individual space, it must be true in the space of relationship as well. We have to pattern our lives behind something greater than what we are. Therefore, if that exists for me, then it must also exist in a relationship. So ideally, relationship reflects the thing that you believe in, and you get in relationship with people who share in the same belief system. That's the thing that releases the stress. That's the thing that releases the pressure. A lot of times we intertwine our lives with people who don't believe the same as we do. We intertwine our lives because of this external suit that we wear, and that becomes the catalyst behind us desiring to be in relationship with that person. So that said, I just ask everybody to take an inventory of yourself. What happens when you do not achieve something the way that you envision it? What happens when your partner does not do a thing the way that you would do it? How do you behave? What do you feel in that particular moment? Analyze those feelings and then come up with the proper answer for yourself, and then behave again according to what you really and truly do believe. That said, greatly appreciate you guys as always. A wealth of wisdom, a wealth of knowledge, and like I said, I just greatly appreciate you. For those of you who this is your first time joining us, again, you can find us on all these days, right? So this particular show is reframing the image of relationships, which is the fourth Saturday of every month. The third Saturday of every month is the Hearts of Women podcast. Every Friday, you have the Hearts of Men at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then every Tuesday, you have Coach's Corner, where two certified coaches get together and we talked about things such as leadership, not just within the business sector, but also in the family sector as well, because that's where leadership should exist. So, that being said, do you guys have any other words that you want to share with the people?
Just keep reframing your relationships. Just keep listening and considering and reading, and but don't listen to everybody. You got to be careful.
That's important, though. There's a lot of talking heads out there.
Self reflection is key. That's what I would say.
This was wonderful. I don't have anything else.
Listen, y'all go check. Where's Disrupting Silence found at, by the way?
You can get it wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm on YouTube, and yeah, we just pivoted the old show, the
Okay.
old platform, and just a new direction. We're taking
Okay.
it. That's all.
All right, very well. So that being
Yeah.
said, check out Miss Queenie Love Disrupting the Silence podcast on YouTube. I know it's on Instagram.
It is,
Um,
but listen, y'all, there's not a lot of scripture over there now. I'm just gonna tell you. But what you
oh,
will find is a lot of authentic love and respect for humankind. So please come on over.
Greatly appreciate that. Next time, Queen, I need you to wear your hat. Listen, that being said, y'all have a great rest of your day. It's a beautiful sunny day in the great state of Georgia. Go out there and get some sun. Look, allow the best version of yourself to be a blessing to somebody else. Y'all have a great day.